This is Mindustry Eviction server gameplay. This match, a few days ago, I played a 1v1 against a lead tier player, and this is the result. So the starting move in all the build orders I use is this 2 silicon schematic. Silicon first is pretty much critical since it goes into all the stuff that you need to ramp. You're going to need daggers to take neighboring hexes and expand your space. You're going to need monos to ramp your copper and lead. Monos are absolutely critical. There's just no comparison to getting lead from drills or copper. Usually 2 factories is enough. If you're going to do a lot of low tier building fast, then you might even go for 3. But this is sort of pushing the boundary of what 2 smelters can do this early. The 2 mono factories and the dagger factory and the building that I need to do early are gonna run out of silicon, and you're gonna lose some efficiency on the monos. But the trade-off for that is if I went for 3 smelters instead, then I'd bottom out of copper and lead earlier than I need. And all of the basic versions of these other resources need to happen too. The thorium needs to go down 2nd or 3rd because you need air blasts as soon as possible. And that steam generator, you need that to actually power all of this basic stuff. When you're starting in Hex, the absolute best is at least 4 water tiles, because the thing that really is going to limit you is graphite. You get a bit to start with, and you can build some of the opening stuff, but you can't get any of the really good power plants, and you can't do a lot of water extractors. So replacing water extractors with water pumps allows you to keep getting that efficiency, but you're not spending graphite on it, and you're also not using as much power. So if you start in a hex that's got no water at all, you're at a little disadvantage. Okay, so I've got at least one of all the most basic stuff up. The 2nd steam generator is intended for the first real silicon plant. So the goal here is to get 3 of those silicon schematics stacked together. They're designed in a way that they can just sit next to each other, and any of the inputs and any of the outputs will work. And hook that up to an air blast that has water pump going into it. And you want to get that by 4 minutes. And that's sort of my goal for the early game. And all the different builds branch after that point, but those 6 smelters operating is like the pivot for getting started. And you see the I've looked at the math for monos and how well they ramp. It's true that in not absolutely every case, monos are best relative to drills, but the window where drills are better as far as what you spend to do it and when it produces more than monos is like 30 seconds long out of the entire game. There is one window that's like 2 minutes into it where the drills have given you more than the monos would have. But the monos keep ramping and you don't have to pay attention to them. And they will almost always give you way more than you need, and you never have to worry about copper lead again for a while. There is a point much further on where I'm getting into very large scale building where I am getting low on copper and lead. Another factor in that is that I really like to use core unloading schematics that are pulling out lead, because I'd rather be getting lead from those monos than building drills. So that depletes things a little bit faster. There's lots of crucibles making their pyrrhotite from core unload and things like that. I also got a diff generator schematic that pulls out lead. So at a point in the mid game, I want to drop a few more mono factories and then put the overdrives on them. And that really will have you set for the rest of the game. At that point, your unit cap is going to be in the 1-200 range, and you're just going to have a huge army of monos giving you everything you need. Okay. So the build that I'm going with for this game, the other player is directly to my south on the opposite end of the map, so it is not a fist fight, it is a longer range fight. Fist fights are more brutal and scrappy since you meet your neighbors a lot earlier in the build, so you gotta fight them with lower tech. But this, I've got room. I'm going for the 8 dagger unload as the main opening piece. So with that build, you want another set of smelters. That'll provide the silicon that needs to go into this thing, and it's going to pull lead from the monos. And then you just leave these on attack, and they spread out throughout the map. And you need all that territory to either set up sort of your initial perimeter, so that's defenses on sort of an outer range of hexes. If someone else establishes a perimeter close to you before you can take a lot of space, then that's going to force you to play dense instead of sparse. And I don't play dense well at all. I don't have a lot of practice on it. I'm not good at it. It's a lot more scrappy gameplay, which I'm not good at. So I much prefer to have a lot of territory and then be fighting on the boundaries of it. And when I need to build stuff, I'm doing it there's plenty of open space, empty cores available to do a lot of unloader schems. I really use a lot of unloader schems. So left on attack, the daggers go off, and they'll just keep taking territory, and I don't have to pay attention to it at all. So now I've gotten to the first real power plant, and that's going to drive sort of the second tier of resource schematics, sort of the next phase in ramping up economy. So this is air blasts on most things, more glass, a need to establish graphite. In this particular game, I'm not going to build enough graphite soon enough, and I'm going to end up waiting on it a lot. It's just bad judgment in the moment that it's a bad habit I have to not build enough graphite. Pretty much at this between early and mid game, you always could benefit from more graphite than you have. So the milestones that you need to be hitting around this point is you need the platinum, and that is for overdrive, since overdrives are a great multiplier on stuff you've already built. So add one more building and get 50% more. Great, we love it. And you need the platinum for cyclones, because cyclones go into the effective defense. You can do scrappy defense earlier than that, but it's not going to hold long term. It's not going to hold against a big attack, and it's not going to hold against mass zeniths or a big concentrated ground push or something like that. So here's the point where I wish I had more graphite. There's a funny little trade-off where the efficient graphite building requires graphite itself to build the multi-presses. So it's an easy mistake to make where you run out of graphite and then you drop a bunch of multi-presses and you can't finish them quickly. So I have an alternative schematic that is just regular graphite presses where you drop one air blast and 6 presses. And that is my go-to for I'm out of graphite and I need to build. So that was a mistake. Don't do what I just did. I should have built the 6 press one there, and that would actually be getting graphite out. Not quite as much, but you need to have a little bit of it banked before you can drop the bigger pieces that actually take care of it long term. Yeah, and try to avoid leaving unfinished stuff. Don't start building it unless you know you're going to be able to finish it, because all of this is wasted attention that's not producing as soon as it should. Right. So there comes the platinum. If you can, you want to build your platinum with an oil patch and not with extractors. Extractors are easier. I default to them more often than I should, but that's what it is. It's a lot more energy efficient. It's a lot more initial construction expense efficient. And there's less inputs to worry about. But oil is a little, it's set to be a little bit rare. Like, you might get one decent patch in 10 hexes or so. So at this point in the game, there's a fair but not guaranteed chance that you're going to have a reasonable oil patch to actually place that on. So you need the platinum. You also need a poly factory around this point, because this is the point where the building times for the stuff that you need to be dropping, like the larger scale, higher efficiency economy schematics, take longer to build, and it's unreasonably long for just the player unit. So you need the polys to come in and start helping out. And before you drop the poly schematic, you want to make sure that your lead and your graphite income are enough to support it. The next milestone after the polys and the platinum is surge. And the surge is necessary because that's the ammo you put into cyclones if you actually don't want to die. And it's necessary for domes, since domes are the best boost and the easiest boost. And it's also the most efficient phase boosting. Okay, so we're going another step up as far as economy buildings. Once I've got single pieces and enough banked up, then I go for these double air blast with the overdrive and the plast belt. And that'll go on Titan, and that'll go on Thor. And that is to start banking up for either when I'm dropping a lot more tier 3 factories, and banking up for if I want to drop a Thor power plant. This unloading schematic with the 7 diffs, that's really a go-to for me. This will make a good amount of power even before you have plast. You have plast, it makes more, and then you drop a phase factory, and the unloader is built into it, and it automatically starts working, and that'll give you up to, I think it's like on the order of 20,000 power. And that'll support a lot of full-size economy factories and forts and that sort of thing. And then the next step up after that one, it takes more attention to place, but it's a 10 Thor generator that's got the built-in Titan drill. And that takes a little patch of Titan near some thorium to feed into it, but that'll make a lot of power. And that's the kind of power that you need for like extractor to silicon mass production unit factories and that kind of thing. Like I'll usually pair a big Thor reactor and then a bunch of flare factories or crawler factories or something like that, since those are very power hungry, but only power hungry. They just need sand to place. So a lot of times empty space in hexes that is otherwise not valuable will get these tier 1 factories on it, and it just takes power to put into them. Okay, so I've got some minor defenses and perimeters set up. I made sure to go down to where the border is with where the lead player is playing against me, and once I've got that fort up, then that will be safe from any sort of minor T1 pushing and up to a few zeniths. When I see that he's able to produce a more significant army or attack, then I need to go down and upgrade those. And then it's just a matter of, will I notice in time or not in the game if I need to upgrade things soon enough? And then there's a matter of if someone goes around or not. So I've got a little bit more space than him. I've got more economy built up, and although we probably won't get a real good look at it anytime soon, my economy tends to be denser than this other player's. So I am pretty strongly ahead. Yeah. This glass factory here. Glass is an interesting resource in sort of the way this economy works, because the kilns produce really quickly relative to the actual demand for building. Like, you can start out with a single kiln schematic and that will have you set for a really long time. You need a bit more when you get into tier 3 and above, because that actually feeds into the unit factories. But even then, it doesn't use a whole lot. So like 1 5 kiln schematic there and boosted, that's gonna have me set for most of the game easily. Glass is just something you usually don't have to worry about much. So this hex, I am intending to put a dome on that in the future. I use a lot of stuff that pulls out titanium from the core, especially these power plants. So you need to make sure that you have a lot. And because the titanium map generation spawns are a little bit sparser, it makes a lot of sense to take the patches that you do have that are extra good patches. You can fit 2 or more air blasts on them, and then dome those. And so for the attention of putting down 2 drills, you're getting 5 drills worth of product. And that takes care of your needs for much longer than doing individual drops without worrying about the overdriving. So here I am, not paying attention to graphite well again. This is my larger place anywhere. It's doing it from oil extractors, graphite schematic. And it uses a lot of graphite to put it down. And I didn't have that. That's why I chose to put it down. So I'm just gonna sit there not building anything for a while, and sure, let's go take a look. So those are not strong defenses. They'll work against the T1 stream, and really what I should be doing is putting up junction walls so that my daggers are going around and taking more space instead of just dying to arcs. But I'm gonna keep working on this instead. And I'm not really gonna get punished for wasting those daggers. So he is expanding around to the left a bit, and I'm gonna need to put at least some defense to the left to protect against him wrapping around if I want to be completely secure, or do my own sort of wrapping around and then building forward forts. But I'm not doing it yet. This is the actual dome going down that's targeting those 4 titanium air blasts. And one optimization you can do with your attention is, while you're building, like actually putting up the buildings for a place schematic, you can be placing the blueprints for the next one. And so you end up constantly using your attention instead of sitting and waiting, and your build attention is going up. All right, so he is starting to send flares on attack. Those flares will never get through 2 cyclones, but when you're putting up defenses, you don't want to focus on the defenses I need right now. You always want to put up more than you need to protect against whatever they're about to build. So these defenses will take some concentrated T3 attacks. And when I start to see those, then I'll go back and I'll add more to them to protect against larger armies, or if he goes to T4 or higher. So I know he's got arcs down there and probably hasn't added much else. He probably hasn't put any real core fort schematics. So this is putting some more pressure in that area by putting up a ground-based Quasar. And those schematics are in a way that I'll be able to put up 4 of those 2 multiplier factories and put a dome on all of them and end up producing something like a Quasar every few seconds out of that base. And I'll just leave him on attack, and hopefully that'll draw a lot of his attention to defending those hexes, and he won't be building up elsewhere. Okay, so the stall is protecting the approach from those flares. I always want units coming in to be shooting walls first amongst everything, especially if they've got menders covering them. You don't actually want them to shoot the shields unless you're sort of on the ropes. The shields are there to protect against bombers and quads. And if those shields go down, then you're vulnerable to bombers and quads. Okay. Yeah, now we're starting to add some of the wraparound defense, and it is generally more efficient to cut down on travel time by building whatever economy you need where you happen to be. So I want more plast. I'm putting it where I happen to be building the fort. Yeah. More surge. That graphite is working. I will end up needing another one of those very large graphite factories later on. Check the progress of Quasars heading out. Resource bank is good, so let's send more of them, sure. Now he's added some surge cyclones, not from a schematic, just manually, and he's got menders. So he is paying a lot of attention, manually building some defense in that hex. And I'm still freely able to just, fly around and put up whatever I want. Sort of attention management is an important aspect of things. You want to be building stuff that takes less attention than it takes for the opponent to deal with it. Okay. Yeah. And here is the secondary support factory. So now I'm at like 3 and 2,000 lead. If I had not been building as heavily, those would easily be up to 10,000 spare copper and lead. But I want to, before I run completely out, get a lot more monos coming out faster and a lot more polys. Polys really are your lifeblood at this point. Everything you're doing is going to happen much faster with polys, and the good players are going to start looking for ways to kill your polys. If your polys are dead, you're not going to be able to do any sort of scrappy defense. You're not going to be able to respond to attacks well. Okay, that's a pulsar factory. And the point of this is I want to be taking some of this fallen and empty space that is in the upper left. Currently, against a stronger player, I'd be vulnerable to a command center in the upper left-hand corner, routing around and cutting off my expansion in that direction, or attacking from that direction where I don't really have any defenses prepared yet. Command center rallying is a big aspect of sort of the army movement tactical kind of game, which I don't really need to play any of that here. Just leaving stuff on attack by default is going to mostly be enough. Okay. So these are high capacity flare factories that just run on power, and I can feed phase into them to get more. And then when I'm using those, it's usually a fort ammo play. I'm trying to run them lower on the surge or whatever they're using as ammo and overwhelm defenses. So those are going to head for, there's a diff generator in that hex that I didn't quite scroll to. They're going to the closest power source, and it happens to go over that hex that's got the cyclones and the arcs in it. In general, the next thing you do if someone's put a bunch of arcs and lancers defending against a ground attack is, okay, well, now make some air and make them respond to also putting up some air defense in the same place, or lose it. Yeah. All right, I'm out of lead. It comes back in quickly, but I'm building fast enough that it still bottoms out. And that's a consequence of not building that second mono factory fast enough. I'm probably on the order of like 50, 70, 80 monos at this point, and it's having trouble keeping up. And completing the wraparound defense. He's going to do a good job of expanding to the west, and he is going to end up being able to build some defenses into that space, but his efficiency is down a little bit as far as being able to build economy in that space as well. So that's sort of a rolling advantage that I'm going to keep being able to make. All right, complete the trench warfare line here. That light stream of crawlers is never going to get through 2 cyclones. Neither is those little bit of flares. He might do better if he were stopping or rallying, but he really needs to move up to some higher tier units because it's going to take T3s to get through those forts that are down in particular. The attack that I'm making on that hex that we're flying over sometimes with the arcs and cyclones, that's almost broke through. It got through a lot of the belts and some of the power. Some quasars got pretty far into there, and they just didn't quite make it due to since they prioritize shooting units instead of cores, then they'll easily get distracted. And he was able to push that back, but that happened with no need for my attention. I'm busy elsewhere, and it's fine. So what is this? 3.3 4K silicon. So that's kind of an uncomfortably low amount of silicon at this point in the game. Like I wouldn't be comfortable dropping more domed T3 factories with that. My main workhorse for mid and late game silicon is that unloader that is pulling phase and lead, and it places some sand air blasts. And so that is 1 drop on a core, and I'll get 50 silicon per second out of that. And that is enough to drive maybe 4 domed multipliers for T3 factories. And so I can alternate between power plants, some Titan, some Graph, these silicon factories, and then keep making more and more T3 factories. One of the sort of intentional design goals for this server and game mode is that it's all about the production amount and not massing an army. So the Mindustry campaign kind of teaches people that you build a factory, you wait to get enough units to either control and then rally like a control group around it, or whatever the name was for that thing, where you have them surround your player unit. And then you go fly behind the NPC defenses and pick off their stuff and shoot their economy and whatever takes it down. That doesn't work here at all. For one thing, there is no logic and there is no direct unit control by the player. And that's a balance thing. With direct unit player control, like on a lot of other hex servers, it is impossible to hold a lot of territory because you also have to build a huge amount of defenses all around it. The player will just fly behind whatever you do. And here you can put perimeters and you can build a lot more economy relative to how much defense you have to put up. These are crawler factories. This is more, I want to take space and expand towards the west. And those are just power, and it's got a sand drill in it. So it uses, it's low power efficiency, but it's real easy to drop. Okay, so the hex servers where you can control things, you can use logic. It's really hard. The balance between attack and defense is really heavy on attack. It's easy to attack around things to avoid defenses. So that's an intentional balance choice to make the units harder to control, and instead you make up for that by building a lot of units. And so that puts the sort of player attention stress on build lots of good buildings everywhere, build giant bases, build giant armies, and pay attention to your buildings much more than your units. That style of playing came from the former free-for-all and simulation servers, where they just do giant masses of units and sort of this V5 gameplay. Stop snoring, cat. Meow. Kitty snores. So, what are we doing now? Yeah. So I've also got these Platinum schematics where it's designed to draw off a belt and then put the Platinum packets back onto the same belt. And that's trying to take advantage of a lot of these, like several Titan Air Blast with a Plast connection that I built a lot of, and Titan Air Blast Plast belt. I've got the Plast belt anyway, so let's pull some of that off and make some Platinum. And the reason I'm going for more Platinum at that point is RTG generators use a lot of it, and I actually like those when I'm rich because you're just looking for one laser drill of Thor to place, and it is making an amount of power comparable to one of my 7-diff unloaders. And I dropped my T4 factory to make some quads. I didn't see that he had any shields up, so he's going to be vulnerable to quads. And any quad factory is going to pull a lot of titanium and platinum relative to other things. So you want to build up those resources in your economy in anticipation of using a lot of that. And it's really going to amp up when I put the second one mirrored. So 2 of those factories and then dome both of them. All right, yeah, complete the wall there so that Pepperoni doesn't get uppity. It is definitely, since this game mode is free for all, it is definitely possible and happens frequently to be paying attention to one person, and then either someone on the Fallen team or someone somewhere else does something that messes you up. Even if it's not a significant attack, it might be taking a critical hex or blocking something up, or drawing units away from where you want them to go. So checking sort of the other things that can go wrong periodically is a good idea in general. Oh, what a great poly army, yes. Build everything I want instantly. Running out of graphite again. So I need another big graphite factory. So that is partially construction, but that is mostly the T3 and 4 factories unloading. If I were going for lots of T2 unloading factories, then I'd need much, much more graphite, since those are very graphite hungry, especially like if I was going for a mass horizon attack with unloaders. So even though I'm out The actual rate of graphite coming in and going immediately out is there. So this isn't completely stalled, but it's going to take a lot longer than it should. So he's built defenses around the middle on our border that are not, they're decent. They've got fuses in them and other things. He's also copied my fort schematic and placed it for himself, which, sure, okay. If you don't have fort schematics and you need defenses, that's a way to do it. But the big problem that he's going to find is that he needed to reinforce the far right much harder than he has. And so that's going to be the point that I break through when I actually start doing army management. All right, here comes the second quad factory. So another aspect of these factories that I set up for myself is I've got a tier 5 annex schematic that I can place any of the tier 4s and then I can overlay it with the tier 5 and it just fits together and works. And that really cuts down the time on if I want to go to those higher units. I'm not like manually threading belts around for the 4 and 5 inputs that you need to put into the tier 5 factory. All right, there's the command center. So now I'm starting to actually do some unit control to finish the game. I could have worked on that earlier instead of doing more economy, but this works too. I'm not really trying to rush through a speed run of beating the other person, give him some time to play. So usually the command center in your spawn base, it works for taking those initial hexes, but you want to deconstruct it because you want to do those things on the front lines before you leave your hex and you're starting to build up elsewhere. All right. Here comes the first, this is what, like 20 seconds of rallying production going through. Cuts through those arcs easy, but those are left over from when it was just daggers. Most of what's going on here is the surge and that tsunami doing water, so it's got sort of the status effect bonus, upping the damage, and the polys distracting all the quasar shots. Now I see that he started rallying in there. That's partially going to help him with the defense, but it's also sort of threatening to attack in this spot, which usually wouldn't happen, but I should cover my bases anyway, so I can drop mirrors of my forts to boost things up further. And if I decided I needed even more, I've got sort of a back plane of more cyclones that can go behind this. I can add tsunamis, I can add more shields, and I can extend those cyclone wings both to the left and the right, although the bridges on those build stupidly. So I need to manually fix them when I do that, so I tend to not do it real often. All right, here I see he's got buildings near an edge. And normally I hate to building versus building, but I want to set up a poly trap. So the point there is to destroy his buildings near the edge, and then the parallax will catch the polys that fly to rebuild, pull them in, and kill them. And if I can get down his poly counts, then my attacks will be more effective because defenses that my units cut through will stay down for longer. All right, more quads. Dome the quads. All right, Plast is at 6.4 when I put that up, and I will take a note of that when I do it so that I can note how fast it's dropping, and I'll know if and when I need to build more Plast effects. So that poly trap was bad. The polys don't actually reach, or the parallax don't reach the polys that are rebuilding those. But I see I have more space over here that is catching the go back and forth because they're going between the 2 points that I'm attacking. So I can draw polys in here by putting parallax down. And this fort expansion isn't really, well, It's probably a good idea anyway, and it might be an oversight not to have already had it. But the intent of that is to shoot stuff that these parallax pull in. But they pull too strong, so they don't actually really get to the cyclones, so I end up adding some fuses later on. My unit production at this point is pretty clearly outstripping his. He's got a lot of T1 stuff in his blob, and I've got a lot of quasars and quads and things in there. So the army advantage and economy unit production advantage is falling to me at this point, and now it's a matter of capping it off. So here's the attack that actually starts to end it. He does have shields up, so the initial passes by the quads are going to get completely blocked. But as the ground units catch up and take down those shields, then the quad bombs will actually start to land. Now his rallied army there, I'm not going to build on that hex yet because they're just going to retake it. And as soon as it respawns, I've got plenty of units in the area to actually finish it off, and then I build into it. So when you take land, you take parcels that had forts on them, you want to build defenses into it as quickly as possible to prevent stuff from coming in immediately retaking it. Like that one flare came through. Imagine there was a stream of daggers or a stream of crawlers or something also coming through. Those will retake stuff that you fought hard for, and then polys will swoop in and put up the entire fort. And you'll be left with just everybody has less army and less resources from rebuilding everything. All right, like there's an example of a crawler wave that comes and retakes something I'm trying to rebuild into. Because my unit production hot is much better, then I'll be able to replace those losses faster and actually eventually hold these parcels that we're fighting over. But it does take some back and forth to actually get through it. So these defenses in the middle, they're holding fairly well for him. It's around the right where he didn't really he didn't put any additional defense into those early hexes of his where he spawned into. That's the part where I'm really rolling around. And then it'll come in behind his more heavily defended hexes. And eventually his power and economy will go down, and those things will just wear away. This is also a point where he'll have lost a lot of his polys due to core explosions or rebuilding while in the range of my attacking units, and they also happen to kill polys. Okay, so quasars are sweeping through. There's no defenses at these points. And these are just some unit factories and self-powered generators. Took that from him. So, yeah, at this point it's decided, and this is the mop-up phase. He lost his hex with all his monos on it, so he's got a time limit for any rebuilding that he might be able to do. I've noticed that from that 6 or 7k platinum, I've gone down a lot, so that means I need more platinum production. I don't really need it because the game is over at this point, but running out is, no, I don't like it, even if it's not necessary. It's unclean to run out of something. Graphite is what you run out of. Don't run, yeah. No, pay better attention and don't run out of graphite. That's what you should go for. But I'll keep dropping these until I see that my platinum amount is actually going back up, or at least staying stable. I probably should have just left it on the map as the game ran out, since I've got the production to sweep through the remaining stuff quickly, and then you can get a better sense of what's actually how a map finishes when there are forts left over from two players that the fight has been decided. Yeah, he's out of power. I've got a wacky quad in his backfield because they're going against power plants first, then a lot of times they're sort of swooping around. AI will drop a bomb on a core and then decide to fly past it and deeper into the enemy economy because there's power plants back there that are now closer. And that can end a lot of games in sort of a bad feeling way because you didn't break the fort, you just had a quad that flew over the defense and decided to keep going because there's power plants back here. Ooh. But hey, I'll take it. Sometimes games will be decided by quad crash damage landing on a container, and containers are full of surge and they'll blow up the core next to it. I'm kind of vulnerable to that since I use a lot of containers next to cores to expand the unloader surface area. That's one of the reasons that I have trained myself to put down a lot more shields than I used to, since even just shields in the backfield with no turrets will protect a lot of things from those wacky runaway quads or bombers back there. Yep, this is ending. You see the path of the flares heading to the fallen core, and then the last one is below that.